Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going back into our life. Last we left off, we were at the pier with Derek's family. It reminds me a lot of Santa Monica Beach, the pier there. So without further ado, let's hop in. Derek slid onto the customer chair next. Nicholas leaned his hand on the edge of the seat and intensely watched the artist go to work. Uh, as the painting took shape, the smile on Nicholas's face grew. He gasped loudly in amazement the second he finally figured it out. The artist proudly added the finishing touches, but then addressed the younger Spores instead. Xavier twirled up the paintbrush. Now, what do you think? It's awesome. Just what I like to hear. You're good to go then.
Thanks.
Thank you. Derek took one last glance at himself in the mirror, hopped off the chair. He pointed at the open seat with thumbs. Your turn, Nico. Nicholas clambered up onto the chair with a pinched brow. Once he got settled, he sat up tall like a big boy. Hello, what can I get for you today? A rainbow. Xavier's gaze instinctively went back to the piece they just finished on Derek, then immediately put together what was happening. That's a great idea, let's get started. Nicholas nodded and then put all of his mental energy into holding still. You weren't sure how long a 6-year-old could keep that up before he started to squirm. While it was fun to watch Nicholas, you knew that your focus was better spent deciding what design you were actually getting. You were next, so you gave the canvas another look. You picked out football, soccer basketball, butterfly, heart, shooting star, rainbow, smiley face, car, skull, spider, peace sign, alien face, cheeks, whisper, and painted nose. Skull. Again, Xavier made a quick work painting Nicholas and was soon jumping out of his chair with a brand new rainbow adorning his cheeks. You walked over and took his place in the chair. Can I get one too? Of course. The three brothers huddled together off to the side, proudly admiring and showing off each other's face paint. Elizabeth crossed her arms, spotting you in the chair next. She'd been quietly hanging around the stall, attempting not to be impatient. You were the last one left to go. I can start when you're ready. Right, you shifted your attention away from the group as you stared directly into the artist's face. You liked their pink hair. It was pulled back and tucked under a uniform hat, and from this distance you realized that their eyes were more purplish than brown, the color they looked when farther away. So what can I do for you? I want to get a skull. I can work with that. The artist dipped a clean brush into their starting color, then they reached forward and began drawing on your cheek. The paint felt cooler than you imagined. Trying not to move too much, the bristle lightly tickled and they guided across your skin. Stroke by stroke, Xavier started with the outer lines, then filled in the center of the drawing. And before you knew it, it was over. You eagerly checked yourself in the mirror on the counter and beamed. Thank you so much. You're welcome. You got up and rejoined the others. There was a delighted pep in your step as you pointed to the final result. Nice choice. Now that you and the Suarez boys were happy with all of your face paintings, it was time to discover the next activity. Derek quickly paid for him and his brothers. You dug out some of your own money too, and then it was time to go. Have a good day. You too, Xavier. Your group gave one final round of thank yous to Xavier before moving on from the stall. The flow of the crowd brought you all drifting down the boardwalk. As you traveled further, you actually spotted your parents. The Suarez boys jumped and waved at their dad, and their dad did exactly the same thing across the way. Next to him, Miss Suarez tried hiding her ear-to-ear grin with her hands, and your moms had their heads close together, laughing at Mr. Suarez's reaction. You shouted, you jumped up and shouted, you jumped and waved, you waved quietly, you sighed at the outburst. Just a wave. All the commotion had you blushing, and in comparison to the Suarez family, you were shyly waving. You simply hoped that your moms could find you amongst the crowd. Knowing that you and Elizabeth had to be close by, your mom scanned over the unfamiliar people until they found you. They both waved back cheerfully. Then your parents continued on with their own adventure. Your group traveled further down the boardwalk, browsing the long row of shops, pointing out all the interesting things on sale. As the afternoon stretched out, your gang continued to enjoy the boardwalk. Elizabeth took long strides and led the pack, cutting her way through the crowd. Everyone was willing to follow her. The Suarez brothers were giving her some leeway since it was her first time there, and you were used to your older sister's attitude. She was making a beeline to the roller coaster, the singular big kid ride of the boardwalk, and nothing was going to stand in her way. You kept up with Elizabeth and walked alongside her. You hung back with Derek, George, and Nicholas. Elizabeth was fine on her own, and you weren't just there for the rides. You wanted to spend time with your friend. Nicholas had stopped holding on to Derek, instead flailing around on his own. Derek continued to keep a sharp eye on him. He occasionally pursed his lips. Nicholas was on the cusp of wandering further away and safely allowed. You watched the little boy as well. His intention wasn't nearly as single-minded as Elizabeth's. He eventually started to lag, unable to keep up with Elizabeth's neck-breaking pace. Nicholas tottered at the end of the group, slowing his pace, falling behind, then bursting forward to catch back up. It happened on repeat. His eyes drooped and his head bobbed forward. There was an expression of vacant determination on his face. It was a special kind of stubborn, only the youngest people in society could muster, the type where the concept of stopping wasn't just ignored, but flat out didn't exist in their minds. Yep. Luckily for Nicholas, he had a more self-aware brother who could set limits for him. Hey, let's sit down for a second. What? It's a long walk, especially if you got small legs. So, you mean for you? That's right, I do need to take a break. Derek willingly accepted Elizabeth's shot and his stature. You could guess it was pretty easily based on his leading tone. If Derek wanted to rest, Nicholas would want that too. Derek scanned the area, pointing out some tables in the distance. Elizabeth glanced at the path ahead, but didn't argue about changing course. She picked an empty table that looked to be the cleanest out of the selection. Everybody took a seat with a marked preference for sitting under your half shade. You grabbed your water bottle and took a long and refreshing drink. It remained relatively cool on your tongue. Derek hefted Nicholas up on his lap. His brother wiggled slightly, but he found a comfortable position. Ari has the right idea. It's water time. Nicholas gave no audible response. His eyes were completely closed. However, he did accept water. Derek placed into his hand. He sipped it sluggishly. Unfortunately, Nicholas tipped the water bottle upwards, and it started to spill.
Oops.
Derek snatched the bottle back and chuckled. Nicholas opened his eyes slightly, barely perturbed by getting splashed. He rubbed his wet face on Derek's shirt and stayed resting against his chest. Derek patted his head. You had to admit it was cute. Elizabeth and George drank their water too, side-eyeing the scene but not saying a word. You should drink, Derek. You followed Elizabeth and George's example, silently observing Nicholas. You kept your own business? Thanks, I will. He pulled out his water bottle with a smile and began to hydrate. George finished his drink with a final chug. He inclined his head towards the two brothers. Nicholas is going to fall asleep. Elizabeth twisted the cap back on her bottle. She was ready to go. What now? Nicholas let out a small snuffy noise, a snore. Derek looked down at his clearly sleeping little brother, but it was no issue for Derek. He brushed it off as easily as Elizabeth's insult. It's cool. I'll find all parents and they can look after Nico while he naps. Mom and Dad won't mind taking him along since he's down for the count. They're probably sitting at one of the restaurants or browsing a store or something. Liz nodded gladly that it wouldn't be her problem. George appeared more hesitant. Okay. He peeked at Elizabeth and then back at you. Derek smiled reassuringly and continued to pitch his plan.
Anyway.
Plus, Elizabeth wants to ride the roller coaster. I would have had to sit back with Nicholas anyway since he's too short for it. It just makes sense for you three to do that while I'm dropping off Nicholas. So get that right. I'll catch up later. George sighed. He was being left behind thanks to Nicholas, but he was placid enough not to argue with his older brother. Okay, you not accepted it. Are you sure? I'll stay with you so you two aren't alone. Can I go with you, please? We should all go find your parents together. Splitting up is a bad idea. Splitting up? Not a good idea. Yeah. He snuck a glance at Derek before meekly pointing out the instructions. We're supposed to stay together in a group. That it's true. Derek scratched his head, uncertain. But wouldn't it be lousy for everybody to come? Listen to George. We should stay together. It'll be easier to find your parents if we work together. The more the merrier. You shook your head at Derek's view. It'll be easier if we work together. He paused again, but ultimately grinned. Yeah, you guys are right. It was a relief that he wasn't going to run off. Elizabeth, however, sighed in exasperation. Fine, we'll all go. Let's make it quick. Find the parents, leave the kid, ride the roller coaster, in and out. It'll be a team effort. He put on his game face, ready to get the day back on track.
It's on.
We've got a mission. Let's get it done. Operation Find Our Parents is on. Derek winked in full confidence. We'll see that roller coaster soon. Derek carefully scooped his brother up from his lap and adjusted him onto carrying position. Nicholas wrinkled his nose, but otherwise didn't stir when Derek hopped to his feet. You dealt with your water and stood as well. Elizabeth and George followed shortly behind you. Derek sped down the boardwalk, moving fast, but smooth enough not to bother Nicholas. Even the rest of the group had to keep up a good pace not to be left behind. Everyone went down the line of stores and peeked into restaurant windows. You spread out across the row, using your numbers to go through multiple places at a time. Despite dividing and conquering, no one was further than shouting distance, and you all kept an eye on one another. However, even with the effective crisscrossing strategy, there was no sign of the missing parents. You regrouped on one side of the road, mixture of concern from most impatient from Isolde.
Man.
What now, team? Do they have a lost child station in this place? We could tell them we lost our very large toddlers out on the boardwalk. George snickered, and while Derek grins goofily, he ended up being the one to shake his head and nix the idea. Kids are taken to the office, the first aid station. We just end up stuck there until our parents came to get us. I doubt we'd be any faster. Fine, then how about we just wake Nicholas up already? Then we wouldn't have to find our parents. No! The brothers harshly whispered in sync, leaning towards Elizabeth with the utmost intensity. Nicholas twitched in Derek's arms from the motion. Both of the boys tensed. Derek froze, grimaced until Nicholas yawned and shoved his face back in Derek's shirt. He and George sighed, visibly relaxing. Elizabeth raised an eyebrow with their production.
Seriously?
What kind of older sister are you? If Nicholas is sleeping, then he needs his sleep. And it's not just about being nice. Nicholas won't want to have fun. He'll start crying and yelling. And then we'll have to carry him around while he's grouchy unless we can manage to get him back to sleep. But why do all that when he's already asleep? Trust me, this is the best case scenario. Well, besides us not being able to find mom and dad anywhere because they vanished, but still. Derek breathed through his nose indignantly while George folded his arms tightly against his chest, standing in stern agreement. Gee, sorry for not being such an expert big sister. I don't even remember Ari being that much of a pain. A pain? A pain? You're gonna call me that while I'm right here? Literally, that is the first rule of looking after kids. You do not wake them if they're napping, okay? You just don't. Like, that's not a thing. Or you will have the most grumpy child on your hands. Gee, sorry for being not being an expert big sister. I don't remember Ari being that much of a pain. Alright, I'm really glad I didn't wake him. You both are such good big brothers. Elizabeth, you may not be an expert sibling for Nicholas, but you are for me. I was never a pain. I thought I was a pretty difficult kid. You continued to observe the others. She's not an expert for him, but for me. I'll take it. Elizabeth's reaction was subtle, but you could tell that she was actually quite pleased. She waved her arms forward, living. Come on, then. The group followed her lead, continued to search, unable to think of any better ideas. All scoured the boardwalk, all four pairs of eyes looking intently. The sky turned golden as the sun began to disappear under the horizon. You glanced into the sea and looked. The ocean was swallowing the day. Light began to click on an already shining boardwalk glow. You took a moment to absorb the sunset. It was nice to take a breath and ignore the noisy backdrop. It was then that you finally got an answer to your mystery. No wonder you hadn't noticed before. Derek, look, you pointed me straight in realization. Derek jumped at the outburst and followed your command. He squinted into the distance before dropping his jaw. As soon as he understood, he blurted out in shock. They rented bikes? Across the way, pedaling along, the two pairs of parents were having a lovely double date. They were far enough away that you couldn't see much more than their helmets, but you could tell that Mom was laughing about something with her head thrown back. That explains that, he muttered under his breath in frustration. Elizabeth cut in with a wordy amusement sort. She gestured at your parents. I really have to give it to our mom, zooming around the whole time. We've been running after them on foot. How are we going to get them to stop? She threw her hands up, waving at them mockingly like she was trying to flag down a moving car on the side of the street. How are we going to scream and jump until they notice us? Derek squinted at the four bikes. He looked pained. He didn't like Elizabeth's sarcastic suggestion at all. He let out a tired breath that sounded dangerously close to a sigh. George tilted his head in concern. Derek's shoulders drooped, visibly lowering Nicholas. He took another deep breath and shook his head. I can't do it. I can't give him to them. Elizabeth's eyebrows shot straight up and her lips pinched together. She thought Derek was losing it. What are we gonna do then? Derek flinched a bit. He met your eyes and then shrugged. Nothing. It's just one of those things. It happens. He fixed his expression to a cheerful grin, obviously trying to bring the mood up. At Elizabeth's disbelief stare, he turned to face the sunset. The disappearing light bathed his profile in a soft glow. It shone on Nicholas and the strain of Derek's arms. Don't worry. I'm gonna hold Nicholas until it's time to go home. The rest of you can keep having fun. Go over where you want. George uncomfortably pulled at his shirt, stretching the fabric at its seams. I don't want to go. I want to help. He visibly felt bad about all of this being put on Derek. You got the impression that if George was a little bigger, that he'd offered to take a turn holding his baby brother instead. No, it's okay. I'll be fine. You really shouldn't waste your time standing around with me. Plus, then who would help Elizabeth and Ari around the boardwalk? Then they haven't been here before. You know this place and can make sure they don't get lost or miss the good parts. George turned to you and Elizabeth, but hesitated with his answer. It would help me to know we didn't send them off alone. They're our guests, right? Okay. Thanks, George. Derek leaned close to Elizabeth and whispered, I don't want George to miss out on the boardwalk because of Nicholas or because of me. Please go take him and have some fun. Elizabeth didn't know Derek well, but had a clear enough picture to know it wasn't worth bothering to push him on this. Elizabeth and Derek made eye contact, and for all you could figure, they had some sort of elder sibling telepathy going on. That was the only way you could explain it, because rather than arguing, she agreed to work with Derek. I'll do it. Elizabeth then pressed her lips together and considered you. She snorted, then lightly flickered your nose. But I don't need Ari with me. George isn't a pain. Derek's brow creased, not expecting that. Yeah, I'll stay with Derek. I can stay with Derek? Right, I'll handle taking Derek out for some fun. Good. I thought you could do something useful. Ari? Derek's voice was strangled and hushed.
You don't have to.
You don't have to do that. What about you? Why does it have to be just you? You could suggest that we take turns watching Nicholas. Derek shook his head and you felt your stubbornness.
It doesn't matter.
It's fine. Someone's got to be here for Nicholas, and it's easier if I do it. That's all. Well, that's too bad, because I won't go.
Yeah, sure.
George, show me something interesting. George gulped and nodded. His gaze bounced between Elizabeth and your standoff with Derek, and he wisely decided to take his leave. He led Elizabeth away, passing by assorted stalls. He seemed to have an idea of where he was going, so you figured he and your sister would probably have a good time. Derek shifted his weight from foot to foot, bouncing around like the floor was on fire. He got more panicked, and the further away your sister and his brother got without you. Ari, you have to go. You need to go have fun. You need help more than I need fun. You're not getting rid of me. When the other two were completely out of sight, Derek stopped his frantic movement. He spent all of his excess nervous energy. He met your gaze head on, staring at the friend who simply couldn't help himself from being helpful. His face changed into something tense and small. You wondered how many times he did this, took on all the responsibilities so that others didn't have to be bothered. It didn't seem like he was called out on it much. So he smiled. His grin was tender enough to be genuine. Well, then, if you're gonna be here anyways, we don't have to make ourselves miserable. It's you and me and, well, Nicholas time. Now you're talking.
All right.
Alrighty. He lifted Nicholas higher and stood tall, ready to take on the world. Then his knees buckled and he blushed. Can we sit down somewhere? Yeah, that's probably a good idea. After spending all this time searching high and low, both of you needed a break. You both dragged yourselves over to a nearby bench. It was thankfully empty and away from the crowd. Derek took a heavy seat and exhaled deeply. He kept Nicholas clutched close, his chest. It was a familiar motion, one that Derek must have had done 100 times before. I get why Nicholas is so attached to you. Maybe you shouldn't take on everything yourself. You don't like getting help, do you? I admire how responsible you are. Your parents are lucky to have you. You stayed quiet. I get why Nicholas is attached to you. I mean, you're probably there for him as much as his mom and dad. It'd be hard for Nicholas not to be as attached to you as he is.
Maybe?
Oh, maybe. He appeared surprised at your observation and unsure how to respond. He leaned his head back and whispered to the sky. I don't think that's such a bad thing. You weren't sure what to make of that. He wasn't lying, but he looked sad for it to be the full truth. He didn't say anything more about it. After you both got settled, Derek carefully reached into his pocket. He struggled to dig around to find what he was searching for. Aha! He pulled out a special snack baggie. Triumph. It was still completely full and untouched from this morning. Derek tried to pick out some morsels from the bag, but it was even harder to keep Nicholas from flopping over. Need some help there? Derek flushed at your offer and became self-conscious over the fact that you noticed his
Thanks.
difficulty. Thanks. Despite his embarrassment, he passed the snacks to you. He took the baggie and studied hold on to Nicholas. Oh, I just need the granola chunks. You can leave the other stuff in there. Is that your favorite? Yeah, but no. You squinted at him in confusion. He laughed, cheeks having expected your reaction. It's my favorite snack in the bag, but that's not the reason I want it. The other stuff isn't for me. There's a handful of cereal Nicholas secretly likes. That's why he can have something that's not just candies and cookies. I brought the walnuts for George in case we were out too long and he got hungry. And his gaze he dropped his gaze from you shyly.
Honestly,
These chocolate chips are for you, because maybe you'd get hungry too. That's 4 handfuls. You always think ahead. That's so nice of you. You shouldn't use your snack bag for other people. Stop doing everything for everybody else. And what if you need more for yourself? You beamed at his consideration. You frowned at his admission. We beam at his consideration. That's cute, okay? I mean, he gives himself away to people, and that's a problem. But it's with the best of intent. He was such a
no
nice
worries.
person. It's nothing. His tone was bright at your encouragement. Do you want any chocolate chips? You can take it. Sure, thank you. I don't want it. You should use your special snack bag. You nod and accept. You shake your head. Sure, thank you. Derek beamed, more than happy to share. His planning had come in handy, your appreciation of the snack. You carefully fished out some chunks of the granola that were slightly sticky to the touch. You dropped them into Derek's outstretched hand.
Thank you.
Thanks. He popped one of the tiny oat clusters into his mouth and started chewing. You decided to pull out your own snacks. You wanted to eat and share your own snacks with Derek. You offered Derek some of your own snacks. You left the snacks in your pocket. Let's share our snacks with Derek. You want some? You held out the baggie in place where you could just pour it out for Derek, and he said yes. His eyes lit up in amusement as he considered your snacks.
Definitely.
That'd be great. Sharing is caring. And thanks for getting mangoes for you, by the way. If I was going to get a second thing for me, it would have been that. So it really worked out. You tipped some of the snacks out of your bag for Derek, and he gratefully munched on them. Both of you leisurely enjoyed the time. The bench was comfortable and the food was delicious, and the scenery was busy enough that there was always something to watch. The munching and high-pitched snoring served as the only sounds between you for a while. You passed Jack the last cluster of granola. You had to really try and get it out of the bag around all the cereal and walnut chunks. He accepted it with great enthusiasm and then took his final bites, and he swallowed satisfied. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, remember to hit like and subscribe. Also, I'm sorry for my voice right now. My testosterone is hitting hard today. My voice is cracking and gruff and all over the place. I'm really not sure what it's doing. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye-bye.